At the end of my Across the Spider-Verse video essay, which you should check out if you have 2 hours to spare, I alluded to a Blu-ray that I really wanted to talk about, and that of course is the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Blu Ray. Now we'll get into why I wanted to discuss this Blu-ray specifically, but just a little bit before that, I want to talk about the importance of physical media and archiving. This video will have a general theme of physical media and the importance of archiving, just because of, well, you'll see later. But in recent times, especially on the internet, people have been having this conversation about the importance of physical media and archiving things because of streaming services and all that type of thing not really being permanent. I will talk about that a little bit in another section of this video, but on a more film history side of things, film, like the way it used to be stored when early film was happening, wasn't really preserving the films, especially because film is very flammable. So the warehouses that these films were being kept in would oftentimes catch on fire, and then all of those films would be lost to history. A case study for the importance of archiving and all of that type of thing within film specifically is what happened with OSYMYSO. So just a brief background, because there is so much that could be said about OSYMYSO and his work that I cannot do it justice in this little bitty section, but I really encourage you to look him up and look at his works, because it's very important to Black history as well as film history, and Black film history specifically, that overlap there. But Miso was a prominent Black director and producer in the early 1900s who directed films that focus on the lived reality of Black people in the US during that specific time period. If you know anything about US history and Black history, there was a lot going on around that time, to say the absolute very least. There's much more to say about him and his works from a film studies perspective, but that is a topic for another day. In an article written by Charles Musser, who is a film historian and professor of film studies at Yale and much more, he wrote in a piece called Race Cinema in the Color Line, although OSYMYSO made roughly 22 silent feature films, and as an aside, some sound film as well, between 1919 and 1930, only 3 of them survive, one of them being Within Our Gates, which is arguably his most famous and talked about work, because it survives. The way that Within Our Gates was found and brought back to us is actually something that is hard for me to wrap my head around, because there's so much film history that's lost, and it is so wild how it was found. William Brundage, who is a historian who focuses on the history of the South during and after the U.S. Civil War and everything that entails that, wrote in an article called Why I'll Watch OSYMYSO's Within Our Gates Until I Wear It Out. I highlighted some important parts here, but I'm just going to read the whole mini paragraph. Perhaps because of the controversy the film aroused, after its release, Within Our Gates was lost for decades. Then in the 1970s, a single print entitled La Negra was found in Spain. Using that print, the Library of Congress restored the film during the early 1990s, yet the restoration is at best an approximation of Miso's original production. A brief sequence in the middle of the film is lost, and only 4 of the original English intertitles have survived. In the restored movie, Spanish intertitles were retranslated back into English and an intertitle frame that takes the place of a missing sequence. We will never see the original version of Within Our Gates or the remaining missing films of Miso, and as somebody who has my bachelor's in film, stuff like that makes me want to tear my hair out, because it's like there's so much to learn from those early films, and the fact that we don't have access and will never have access to so many of them really just makes me a little crazy. As I was doing research for this video, I actually came across a article in the newspaper, because I do read the newspaper, written by Jill Lawless of the Associated Press, and this was March 13th, 2026. It's an entire article that I'll link in the description. I just took some screenshots of the most important parts that I wanted to discuss, but feel free to read the entire thing. It's not super long. This article is about Doctor Who. Over 6 decades of Doctor Who, the intergalactic adventurers' adversaries have included evil robots, rampaging Yeti, and the BBC, which erased many early episodes of the now iconic sci-fi TV series. As of that date, a film charity announced Friday that it has found 2 previously lost 1960s episodes in film cans wrapped in plastic bags amongst the possessions of a deceased collector. They have been restored by the BBC archivists and will be available next month on the broadcaster's streaming services. Later, it says, Doctor Who, The Who is an existential question rather than the character's name has become a television institution with millions of fans around the world, but the BBC's attitudes to the show in its early years was careless. Scores of episodes were lost because the broadcaster threw out film recordings or wiped videotapes for reuse. Now, besides the conditions in which film were kept, there's also many other reasons why they might have been discarded. For example, carelessness, as Lawless describes it, or even not having that foresight to think to archive certain works. Whatever the reason be, we don't have access to certain media because of the way that they were stored or not stored. There's a clear connection between what happened with those lost Doctor Who episodes, Micheaux's films, and so many other works around the world, not just in film but in other media as well, that makes me so, I think it's just the curious person in me, but the fact that we'll never know everything, it's impossible to know everything, is kind of what obsesses me about lost media. I promise you this all relates back to Scott Pilgrim versus the World, especially its production and the material surrounding its production and the ones that are included in this Blu-ray. But we will get into that after I do a little bit more contextualization. Just hang in there. With Scott Pilgrim versus the World, years ago I was so sick of streaming services just taking it off and putting it back on again that I actually was making a mental tally about how many times I'd log on to whatever streaming services it was, and it'd be like, oh, Scott Pilgrim's back, oh, it's gone, oh, Scott Pilgrim's back, and it just was this ping-ponging back and forth that I personally was getting sick of. Owning physical media is related to personal archiving, because if companies can just take shows and films off of streaming services on a whim and never put them back for whatever reason, like House of Anubis, it's a problem. With House of Anubis specifically, I believe there was a licensing expiration that was going on with Paramount, so as far as I know, there is no place to stream House of Anubis, and there's so many other shows like Infinity Train, don't get me started on that one, and other things that we can no longer access. It's important, if you love the media, to not only support the people who create the media, but to also make sure that you have access to it by owning it physically, at least in my opinion. As I mentioned, this Blu-ray has so much content, it's actually ridiculous, like biblical levels of greed is the only way I can truly describe it, but looking at all that content over the years has made my enjoyment of the final product so much more significant, just to see how much work and passion and love went into that film, and it's on full display in this Blu-ray and in its special features and elsewhere as well. Now, before we talk about the Blu-ray in its entirety, which will take a little bit, I do want to discuss what a Blu-ray is in general, just on the scientific side, because this is a rabbit hole that I kind of went down into, and I want to touch on it just a little bit, just for completionist reasons. For our very short What is a Blu-ray section, I'm going to start with a simple definition from Lenovo, yes, the laptop people, the tech company. On the website, it states, what is a Blu-ray disc? BD, short for Blu-ray disc, is a high-capacity optical disc technology used for storing and playing back high-definition video and other digital content. There's some more Q&A-like sections in this segment of the website that will be included in the screenshot, but I mostly wanted to have that explanation be given by Terry O'Kelly, who in this documentary talks about the creation of Blu-rays in a Memorex factory or a Memorex facility. And Memorex was a consumer electronics brand specializing in disc recordable media for CD and DVD drives, flash memory, computer accessories, and other electronics. And O'Kelly was the technical communications manager at Memorex.
This is the backbone of an optical disc. It's just a clear piece of plastic with millions of pits molded into it from the center in a spiral pattern working their way to the outside edge of the disc. It's not really legible at this point though, not until we put a mirror layer behind it. That allows the laser to shine its light onto the mirror, have the light bounce straight back to a sensor. That becomes a digital 1. However, if the laser light hits the edge of a pit and scatters, the light does not go back. That's a digital 0. All light is visible energy. All that energy appears in the colors of a rainbow. At the low end of the spectrum are the red colors with their long wavelengths. As we move higher into the region towards the blue and the violet sections, we get higher frequencies and much smaller wavelengths. Red lasers with their long wavelengths work perfectly well with the relatively large pits that appear on CDs. We need ruby red lasers for the slightly smaller pits that appear on DVDs. For HD DVD and for Blu-ray, we need the smallest wavelengths possible to fit in the smallest pits possible on the disc. That's why the lasers for these discs are blue-violet.
And I had never heard of Memorex before this video, and when I was looking into them, I happened to look at one of my Blu-ray / DVD players that I have in my house, and I looked at the logo and it was made by Memorex. I said, oh, worlds collide, here we are. I highly recommend watching the entire documentary, which I will link in the description, because it includes more of the science aspects of the Blu-ray creation, the history, the talking head sections with the experts and the people who are working within the factory or the facility. It also shows the equipment that makes the discs and the process from step to step, which is really good for visual learners like me to actually see, you know, how they're making the thing. Essentially what O'Kelly is saying is that more content can go on a Blu-ray disc because the grooves in the disc are smaller, because the blue and violet light rays are smaller. The DVD red light is longer, which means the grooves on the disc take up more space, meaning there's less content that can physically be put on the disc itself. So the reason I included that little compare and contrast of the Blu-ray and DVD is because, as I explained before, this Blu-ray for the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World has so much content, I genuinely cannot explain it. I've tried to explain it to people and I start to sound like a conspiracy theorist with, you know, the murder board and all of that. So this is kind of my justification, or at least one of my justifications for making this video in the first place. But the DVD will add some contrast to the Blu-ray for you to just really see how they compare just content-wise. As explained before, Blu-rays are literally designed to hold more content than DVDs and be at higher quality, so there's no real surprise that the Blu-ray has more than the DVD, but still. I did want to mention here, since we're just talking about Blu-rays in general, a lot of Blu-ray packs tend to come with 3 versions: the Blu-ray disc, the DVD disc, and a digital code to access the movie online to have in like this digital archive type of thing. And nowadays it's through a website called Movies Anywhere. And what I've noticed with Movies Anywhere is that it's kind of like a streaming interface, so you can click on the features and skip around and whatever, but it does not feature, at least the ones that I have, the director's commentary that is available on the physical Blu-ray disc, which is unfortunate. So that's kind of the only way you can access the director's commentary, is if you put the Blu-ray disc into your player or your PS5 or whatever. Now with that out of the way, let's get more into Scott Pilgrim. So as I mentioned before, this video is going to have an overarching theme of archiving, specifically because I had to access a lot of old blogs, social media accounts, and posts and whatnot to contextualize some of the things that I was seeing in the special features that are featured on the Blu-ray. And one of those is Brian Lee O'Malley, the creator of Scott Pilgrim's old blog, Radio Maru, which I think right now, if you try to look it up, it would lead you to his Tumblr, something like that. But this is a post about the Blu-ray versus the DVD. And just in general, blogs and social media posts are extremely important to the creation of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and the features on both the Blu-ray and the DVD discs. And more importantly, for when we talk about Snot Girl, the comic, which we will talk about in the next video. So on November 1st, 2010, Brian wrote, "Next week, November 9th, the Scott Pilgrim DVD and Blu-ray come out, so we have a few events planned. Tonight, Monday, at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, Q&A with me and Edgar Wright, the director and co-screenwriter of the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World screenplay, moderated by Guillermo del Toro." Yes, that Guillermo del Toro. And then on November 9th, Brian wrote, "The DVD and Blu-ray combo pack are out today in North America. Watch 17 hours of bonus features in the comfort of your own home. That's on the Blu-ray. I don't know how much the DVD has. It's a bit less, but both versions are filled with stuff, capacity maxed out." And then he goes on to list an Amazon link for lazy people, but that part's not important. He said 17 hours of bonus features. 17. Now, 17 might sound like a crazy amount, but you have to understand that I don't even think that 17 hours includes the several different versions of the movie available on the Blu-ray, as well as some of the galleries that you have to manually click through. I don't think it includes that runtime. So I think it's well over 17 hours, which is incredibly ridiculous. And I say that with the most love in my heart. That is crazy. And I enjoyed every single minute, every single hour that I spent combing through this Blu-ray just for this video. We'll go more in depth on the differences between the Blu-ray and the DVD content, but here is a side-by-side of the Scott Pilgrim Blu-ray versus the DVD from the Universal website from back in the day. It's an archived website that I got these screenshots from. As you can see, significantly more on the Blu-ray, and I don't even think this list includes everything, so just keep that in mind. There is a little bit more contextualization we have to do for the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World movie in general. Part of me really wanted to do a complete timeline of the creation of the film, how it was conceptualized to pre-production to production to post-production, yada yada yada, all of that. But we would be here longer than the Across the Spider-Verse video essay. If you know, you know. I wanted to keep the video contained to the Blu-ray and its contents, but I also wanted to include some things related to the pre- and post-production of the film that aren't featured in the Blu-ray for archival and full story purposes. Back to Brian's blog, he initially started to add updates on his website throughout the inception of the film, the pre-production, post-production, etc., as well as on the official Scott Pilgrim comic website, which I don't think is accessible anymore, which is why archiving is important. Thank you to the archivists. Bless you. This one from 2005 reads, "This is all the space we need to tell you about the movie news, because there isn't much. The Scott Pilgrim series has been optioned by Universal Pictures, which means they have the option of making a movie, or several based on the concept. Edgar Wright is attached as director. There's an IMDb page for Scott Pilgrim, which is pretty meaningless. Other than that, we'll let you know when more stuff happens." It's so interesting looking at old posts like this, because how many people then were like, oh yeah, Scott Pilgrim's gonna be as huge as it is now. It's so cool to just look back on it and just see how it's grown. On the 3rd of February 2005, Brian writes, "Just so you guys know, I don't think I'm going to talk about the movie thing anymore until it's all finalized and I'm comfortable with the whole thing. It seems to be spreading around the internet really fast. Yesterday I was pretty giddy, but today I feel kind of weary and cautious and whatever. You know, it could all fall apart, too many expectations, premature backlash, blah blah blah. So I'm not going to talk about it on this site until a day as it is, a real happening thing." March 30th, 2006, Brian writes, "Edgar's new thing. For those tracking film stuff, our friend Edgar Wright's current picture, Hot Fuzz, has an in-progress website at working title, complete with the promise of continuing video blogs." More on video blogs later. 2 video blogs have been posted as I write this. As some of you know, Edgar is also working with Michael Bacall, who is the co-screenwriter of the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World film, on a possible future Scott Pilgrim film, which has yet to be greenlit. We will hopefully learn more in the next few months. In 2008, that movie section gets updated. There's a Scott Pilgrim movie. It might happen. Edgar Wright will direct. He and Michael Bacall co-wrote the screenplay. It has been adapted from the whole series, not any one book, although it is titled Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Michael Cera has been cast as Scott and Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona. August 19th, 2008, there's an update to There's a Scott Pilgrim movie. Title Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Start date unknown, late 2008, early 2009. Release date unknown. Written by Edgar Wright and Michael Bacall. Directed by Edgar Wright. To star Michael Cera as Scott, Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona. Edgar was also saying things about the film that is important to look back on, I think. This is still from Radio Maru, but it is from an interview done with Edgar Wright. "You have a great cast that's been announced for Scott Pilgrim so far," the interviewer says. Wright responds, "There's some more interesting people buzzing around as well. It's going to be a big ensemble, that film, and there's a lot of fun people we've already been talking to, so there's more to come with that." The interviewer goes on to ask, "Brian Lee O'Malley still has a couple more issues of the story to finish, so have you talked to him about where the story is going to go so you can include some of that in the movie?" Edgar Wright responds, "The only book that isn't written is the 6th, but our film takes place on a slightly different trajectory after the 2nd book, and it includes elements from books 3, 4, and 5. In some cases, Brian has used lines in his books from our first draft of the screenplay, which is like strange performance style transference, and it's been brilliant being able to pick his brains throughout this. On one hand, it's a very, very faithful adaptation, and on the other hand, it definitely molds events from those books into a 3-act structure, so that's been interesting." That was from July 24th, 2008. "Once you figure out if the strike is happening, do you know where you'll shoot the movie? Would you like to go back to the UK for it, or do it here?" Edgar Wright says no, it wouldn't be in the UK. It'll either be here or Toronto. It'd be really crucial to kind of shoot in Toronto, so that's what I'm aiming for. And I include that because there is a special feature that talks about the importance of on-location shooting, especially when it comes to adaptation studies, which we might discuss another time, but that is the topic of one of the special features in the Blu-ray. There's a longer interview that Brian posts in August 27, 2008, and I won't read the entire thing, so I'm just going to read the highlighted parts. Edgar Wright responds to a question here. "I'm not going to lie and say that I had read the book and said, oh, I have to make this film. Someone else read the book and said, Edgar should make this," which shout out to them because little did you know. Later, the interviewer asks, "Can you tell me anything about the production of it? What stage are you guys in?" Edgar responds, "We're hopefully going into production later this year. We've been doing a lot of work on it in a conception level and getting getting into casting and crew and stuff. That is the understatement of the century. Once we start looking at more of these special features, the pre-production work, bless those with patience, is all I gotta say. Answering the question, do you have a grasp on how you're gonna work with how many books are eventually going to be in the series? Edgar responds, I've been very keen to involve Brian in every stage of this so that he feels happy and comfortable with what we've written. And as Brian, I'm sure, will tell you, there are a couple of bits in the fourth and soon-to-be fifth book that are lines from our screenplay. Another connection to the study of adaptations and stakeholders, who gets a stake in the creation of an adaptation, and some producers or some creators don't like to be a part of that, so I just think Brian's involvement in the film in general is really interesting, considering that it kind of takes on its own identity separate from the comics.
Blazing on the Blu Ray and DVD.
Oh my gosh, when?
Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Collector's Edition.
If we're gonna date, you have to defeat my 7 evil exes.
Yeah. Wait, what?
From the director of Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead.
That's actually hilarious.
Prepare to have a new favorite movie.
Yeah. What else?
It's breathlessly brilliant.
Bingo.
With knockout bonus features.
Let's do it.
Fight to own. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World on Blu Ray, DVD, and digital download.
Okay, now we're getting into the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World DVD and its contents. So because all of the features that are on the DVD are also on the Blu-ray, I'll go more in depth with the overlaps in the Blu-ray section. So consider this a brief overview for that. I don't own the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World DVD, so I rented it from my local library. Shout out libraries. Where would I be without the library? Entering the DVD, we get the typical DVD stuff, disclaimers, and anti-piracy screens and whatnot. We also get a couple trailers for films that are coming out around the same time Scott Pilgrim vs. the World did, like Despicable Me. We also get a trailer for the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, not to be confused with Scott Pilgrim EX. 2 different games, 2 different decades. Right. We also get an advertisement for anywhereforyou.com, which is essentially Movies Anywhere's granddaddy, if I could put it that way. It's basically where you could have the digital version of the film that I was talking about with the combo packs. There's also some more little stuff that happens before the film menu, but that's not super important. Now, there's a lot of video essays that go into the art of DVD menus and the lost art of DVD menus and whatnot, but I will not be doing that. I'm mostly just going to be discussing this specific DVD menu, but there are so many different features from older DVD menus compared to now, and there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down with that as well. Even though this DVD menu is not as complex as the Blu-ray DVD menu, there's still a lot of effort that went into creating this DVD menu, and I'm giving credit where credit's due because it is in its own category compared to the Blu-ray. It starts with a loading bar that's like a video game loading bar, and then it has a press to start visual, and then it gets into our main visuals here with Michael Cera as Scott in the center. The song that's playing is We Are Sex Bob-omb, but it's the instrumental. I'm not going to play it because I don't think Universal plays about their copyright, so just imagine it in your head. So we have this red background and the PNG of Scott in the center. It's kind of shaking, moving. This is the same graphic that is used in the ScottPilgrimTheMovie.com website, which we'll talk more on that later because it is lost media. It no longer exists. The DVD options are play movie scenes, bonus features setup, and they're not stationary. They are also kind of floating and moving around. The play movie option is self-explanatory. It starts the movie, but when you click on it, there's a cool animation with the same font as Ninja Revolution from the film, and the announcer says,
Here we go.
When you click on the scenes option, the music disappears and is replaced with the sound effects that we hear when we see what's Wallace's and what's Scott's in the apartment in that one scene towards the beginning of the film. And this is perfectly edited with the scenes and lines sliding into place. The screen is segmented by a bunch of vertical and diagonal lines that are similar to comic panels, and each panel has a screenshot or a screen grab that represents the scene that you can click on and enter the film into. And each panel either has a red or blue filter over it. The bonus features has the same sound effects from Wallace and Scott's apartment, followed by the instrumental from the song The Vegan by Nigel Godrich, which we will talk about music and sound in this film a little later. Some of those options open up into another menu, for example, the feature commentary and the galleries. So there's a clear effort made to make this visually appealing and to relate to the film. In the setup, it has that wheel that goes on in Scott's head where he it kind of lands between two things and he ends up saying, I gotta pee on her, that scene. And It's split between the main menu, languages, and subtitles, and then each of those has their own visuals that go along with the section. Even though Blu-rays are usually like the big thing, there was clearly effort made to make this DVD special in its own ways. The custom graphics for each section, the sound design, which we'll talk about sound design later, making specific sounds and visuals appear when clicking on each option, when we click different things. It's just a cool way to make the DVD feel special outside of the Blu-ray. I will say that some DVDs that I have that are recent don't really have this much effort put into it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because obviously you're still getting the main content, the film or the television episode, whatever, but I just wanted to give props where props are due to the people who are in charge of the graphics for the DVD menu, because your hard work really does show, and it does make watching the movie on the DVD special. Okay, very last thing before we finally get into the Scott Pilgrim Blu Ray. I had this video planned for a very long time, and then I was kind of driving my feet with the Across the Spider-Verse video and blah 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 whatever. In the middle of that, the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off Blu Ray was announced on October 3rd, 2025, which was set to release December 2nd, 2025, but actually got pushed back to March 24th, 2026. I bring the Blu-ray into this not to necessarily compare the film to the anime, because that's been done from hell and back, but I bring this up because I don't think that we could ever get away with the amount of content the movie Blu-ray has in recent times. And I bring this up because obviously I don't own every single Blu-ray that's come out in the past 10 years, but for the Across the Spider-Verse Blu-ray, which I talked about more in my last video, it only featured one deleted scene, even though it was alluded to having more than one deleted scene that was going to be put on the Blu-ray by the directors and the filmmakers in the filmmakers commentary. And there's many reasons why that might not have been included. Maybe it's stuff that we'll see in Beyond the Spider-Verse. Whatever the reason, there was a lot of content that was not included on there that was said to be included on there, if that makes sense. Similarly, when the Spider-Man No Way Home Blu-ray came out, there was not a single deleted scene on that Blu-ray, which it said it was going to have one, right? And then when the film got re-released in theaters with the deleted scenes, then they re-released the Blu-ray with the deleted scenes. So if anybody has the original Blu-ray like I do, it is missing content, technically. I will put this here because there's nowhere else to put it, but I'm still mourning the fact that we did not get a director's commentary of Nope by Jordan Peele. It's not too late, Jordan. It's really not too late. I beg. For the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off Blu-ray, I didn't expect it to have as much content as the film did, just because of what Brian responded to in a comment. Somebody around the time that he posted the post on Instagram announcing that the Blu-ray was going to happen said, "This is too cool. I already bought the vinyl set, so having this to place alongside it will be great. Will there be any extras like storyboards, unfinished scenes, etc.?" Brian responded, "It's pretty bare bones, but we forced them to include our commentary." When he said, "Oh, it's pretty bare bones," I was like, yeah, okay, well, maybe we won't get, 17 hours worth of stuff, but at least we'll see something, right? Wrong. So entering the Blu-ray, we get the Universal movie opening, which I will not hum or sing or play because, like I said, I don't want to get copyrighted. After that, it's straight into the menu. So the menu has no sound. There's not instrumental from the original soundtrack or anything. The visuals, on the right side, there's a Scott Pilgrim Takes Off official poster, and to the left, there's menu options. In that rectangle, we have a play episode section, which plays all 8 episodes back to back. Underneath that, 4 episode titles are listed, and the other 4 can be accessed through the More option at the bottom. In general, there's no additional menu pages similar to the Blu-ray or the DVD for the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World movie. In the bonus section, we can access the commentary of Brian and Ben David, who is the creator and executive producer of the anime. You can toggle it on and off. Brian and Ben David offer us some insight into production that we see directly through footage in the film's Blu-ray, but we don't have access to in the anime Blu-ray. The only way we can access that is through tidbits and stories that they tell.
Remember, who was the air horns? Was that Pete from the band?
It might have been Pete, yeah, and then we brought them up in the mix later on.
I don't remember writing that part. I remember getting a note from someone at some point that was an email saying, "Can you explain to me why the music has air horns there?" And I was like,
It's
I don't know.
It's air horns.
It's funny. I mean, I guess it's only funny to us.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a legitimate reason as to why there was no other content included on the Blu-ray, especially because the anime was animated overseas in Japan. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not here to try to slander anybody. I'm just doing this and including this for comparison. In another part of the Blu-ray, we have the setup. It's just to change the language, and there's only options for English or Japanese. And if my memory serves correctly, there were more dubbed versions of the anime on Netflix. It's been a while since I've had Netflix, so I don't exactly remember. And then an option to turn subtitles on or off. One of my research questions for this video that I actually haven't been able to find out yet is who decides what content goes on DVDs and Blu-ray discs. The only real evidence or proof I have to that question is Brian's comment, him saying it's pretty bare bones, but we force them to include our commentary. So I don't know who the them is, but from what I can tell, creators of the content might have a say in what goes in there and what doesn't go on there. It does make me kind of sad that he and Ben David had to, quote, force them to include their commentary, especially because I'm sure there's so many pre-production and post-production things, especially with the voice actors, the actors coming back from the film to work on the anime. I think that would have been really cool to hear some of their insight, especially hearing from Anamanaguchi and their thought process behind working on certain songs and whatever. But I'm not here to complain or mourn about that. I just thought I'd bring it up because it is related to everything that we're talking about, especially because Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was initially on Netflix, which obviously is a streaming service, and if you no longer have Netflix or Netflix suddenly decides to take it off their streaming platform for whatever reason, we won't have it. So having the Blu-ray is the best way of making sure that that does not happen to you personally. We're finally getting into the Blu-ray. Now, it is so expansive that I cannot go as in-depth as I want to into this because I'm telling you 17 hours will not be enough. I will need at least a week. So instead, my goal is to encourage you guys to check out the Blu-ray and explore it yourself if you really love Scott Pilgrim, if you really love film production, whatever, all of that. If you love archiving, hey, there's room for you too. Get the Blu-ray, I'm not sponsored, check it out, and report back to me. Let me know if like your brain exploded because it's a lot to take in. Here is a time lapse. I'm going to do like a sped up version of me going through the Blu-ray because I need you to actually see with your own eyes the amount of content that I'm talking about here. Entering the Blu-ray is different from entering the DVD because there are no film trailers for movies that were coming out at the same time as Scott Pilgrim did, but there is a reason for this, which we will talk about a little later. Besides the Universal song and whatever, we go straight into the menu. So instead of We Are Sex Bob-omb, we get Bass Battle, which is playing in the background, performed by Justin Meldal Johnson and Jason Faulkner. More on both of them later. We have the video game announcer counting down from 7, layered on top of the bass battle. This is followed by footage of each of the 7 X's, starting with Matthew Patel, and as the announcer counts down to Gideon, we get images of the X's, or shots of them from the film, and then it loops. For the visuals on the left-hand side, we have the menu options in a pixelated video game-like font to match the video game vibes from the film and the comic. It kind of curves into something that is similar to a CD or a record or a disc. On the right side, we have the main visuals. It's edited to match the beat until the countdown starts, and then it's edited to the beat of the countdown, if that makes sense. So first, it's the beat of the actual music, the instruments, and then it's following the rhythm of the counting down, the 7, 6, 5, like that. There is a banner on the top that says, it's a scrolling banner with text that says some features require network connection. It's talking about connecting the Blu-ray player to the internet, which is related to BD Live or Blu-ray Live.
No Universal Blu Ray experience would be complete without a visit to the BD Live Center. It's just one click on BD Live from your main menu to get inside. The BD Live Center brings you the newest trailers and on-set interviews, and you can enjoy all this from the comfort of your couch. You can also register to gain access to exclusive content and be part of our BD Live community. Here, you'll find even more bonus features you can't get anywhere else. And the Community tab offers a collection of features that will keep you connected with your buddies. The BD Live Center has all the freshest content, updated and delivered directly to your player. It's the place to be.
Blu-ray Live is essentially a way for you to access extra content from the internet. So instead of putting the trailers on the actual disc itself, which as we discussed would take up physical space on the disc, to maximize the amount of content that's on the physical disc, what they did was allow you to connect your Blu-ray player to the internet and then access trailers and other types of features from there. So it's not actually taking up space on the disc so that you can add more things on the disc itself. All the recent Blu-rays I own don't have BD Live, and from what I've heard, the word on the street is that Universal shut down their BD servers. If that's not true, let me know, but that is what I found when I was researching. So different discs had different BD Live features. You could record your own picture-in-picture commentaries and then upload them to the internet for your friends to see and have the opportunity to potentially interact with the actors and directors of specific films through the BD Live feature, but the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Blu Ray, as far as I was able to find, did not have those ones. As all people I ended up on Reddit, and I was looking at some testimonials from people who had the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Blu Ray around the time that BD Live would have still been live, and we have a user saying, I remember using the BD Live feature on the Scott Pilgrim Blu Ray. I think it mostly just showed trailers for more upcoming movies, probably some other stuff I'm forgetting. Someone responded to that. That disc had a special BD Live center which carried trailers and bonus feature excerpts. Somebody else said, hopefully there's footage on YouTube, but from the Scott Pilgrim Blu Ray, I remember it's all about new upcoming movie trailers like Despicable Me and some other movies. I was curious about that commenter who had said that the disc included trailers and bonus feature excerpts. So I found a website called OSYMYSO Blue, which is a website from the late 2000s that's still active, by the way, covering Blu-rays, 4K, UHD, and more movies. They wrote a review on the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Blu Ray in 2010 and detailed everything that was included on that Blu Ray. Here's a screenshot from the website. Free bonus movie for a limited time. Blu-ray combo pack consumers have instant access to stream action hits, Tremors, or Pitch Black via BD Live smartphone or other computer. So I'm assuming that's the other extra content. Not that there was extra content about the film that was included on BD Live. And like I said, this is why archiving is so important, because these people who were blogging and writing posts in real time at that time have portions on their websites that still exist that are archived so that we can look back and see these primary documents that people were creating at the time. Unfortunately, with the play movie part, we don't get a here we go thing. That's perfectly fine. The film and its features make up for that anyway. Like I mentioned, there's no film trailers or anything that happens after you press play on the movie. So in the chapter section, it's the standard DVD chapter that allows you to click which scenes you want to start at. There's 20 listed here. It doesn't go into a different page like the DVD does. It kind of opens up into more and more little window things, if we can call it that. The Blu-ray menu and the visuals and the audio keep playing in the background as you're clicking through these options. In the setup, here's where you can select the language. You have an option between English, Spanish, French, or DVS, which stands for Descriptive Video Service, which is a voice that explains what a character does, the setting, facial expressions, etc. for viewers who are visually impaired, as well as subtitles. And this is where we're offered the many versions of the movie that we can toggle on or off. This was in the bonus features section of the DVD. Outside of the base movie that we get in the play option on the DVD menu, we have the feature commentary with Edgar Wright, director, co-screenwriter, Michael Bacall, co-writer of the screenplay, and Brian Lee O'Malley, author and cartoonist and creator of Scott Pilgrim. They have their own commentary. We have the technical commentary, which is with Edgar Wright and Bill Pope. We'll be talking about Bill Pope more later. He'll be popping up here and there, who's the director of photography. I have a couple screenshots here from Studio Binder, which is kind of like my filmmaker's Bible when I was in school doing my undergrad. But basically, a director of photography is also known as a cinematographer, and a cinematographer or director of photography presides over the camera and light crews on a film or video production. They usually get involved throughout the production production lifestyle from the storyboards and into post-production, and they liaise with the director to create the images you see on screen. Cinematographers obviously play a vital role in making a film, but what decisions do they make on a daily basis? The cinematographer's primary goal is to capture the director's vision. Using lighting, camera, and composition techniques, a DP translates the vision into images. There's more to their role, but that's just the basic idea. The third option, which is technically the fourth version of the film, if we're including the regular one, is cast commentary number 1 with Michael Cera, Scott Pilgrim, Jason Schwartzman, Gideon Graves, worlds collide with him and Across the Spider-Verse since he's the voice actor for The Spot, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Ramona Flowers, Ellen Wong, Knives Chow, and Brendan Routh as Todd Ingram. Cast commentary number 2 features Anna Kendrick, Stacey Pilgrim, Aubrey Plaza, Julie Powers, Kieran Culkin, Wallace Wells, and Mark Webber, Stephen Stills. The final version of the movie is the trivia track, which when watching the film, trivia about jokes, audio, music, etc. will pop up at the bottom in text. More on that later. I cannot stress enough the importance of hearing directly from the people who worked on a piece of media that you're talking about. That is the primary source that I keep talking about. These are the people who are directly involved in the film, and who better to tell us about the film and their experiences than the people directly involved. This is related to the Across the Spider-Verse video essay because hearing from these people gives us a better idea of narrative and authorial intent by just seeing how they go about creating certain scenes and what they say about it. It's also interesting to just see how one creates meaning through film techniques like camera angle, lighting, and composition, and how it all comes together to create a meaning and eventually, and most importantly, a feeling in the audience. At the very end of the setup, there is an option to toggle on something called button sounds, and this is where I was really scratching my head when I was doing my research on this, because I was like, wow, nobody made anybody add sounds to this Blu-ray. And I don't mean sounds like the audio, I mean like there's sounds like scrolling sounds, clicking sounds that you can toggle on and off through this that is completely optional. This is something that somebody thought would make the experience of the Blu-ray more, and they were right. I'm so tickled by the button sounds. So the scrolling up and down by pressing the up and down arrows on your menu, or I guess the analog stick if you're doing it on like PS whatever, it makes this like pew sound that I can only really describe as the sound of like a Star Wars blaster or like a baby alligator. You know how they sound like lasers or whatever? There's a scrolling left and right, which makes a sound like a digital camera zooming in and out, followed with like a beep, like the sound that it makes when the camera starts recording. It's just these little things that make me think, wow, you really did this for the love of the game. This is so unnecessary, but it really just completes the entire thing. When I got my Blu-ray, these sounds were not automatically toggled on, so you really have to dig through the Blu-ray to find these little things, and then once you click on it, it's like, oh wow, now I'm really getting into the Blu-ray. I'm really seeing all it has to offer. They did not have to include menu sounds, especially different ones for scrolling or clicking. They're different. This was literally all for the love of the game, and I love to see it. We need more like nonsense things like this. Not nonsense like it doesn't matter, but I mean nonsense like it's whimsical. You made these button sounds and these clicking and scrolling sounds just for fun, and I love that. We're finally here. The extra section is by far the longest part of the Blu-ray, as well as the longest part of this video. There's a lot of different subsections that open up into different windows and whatnot. It's a lot, but we're gonna get into it. We first are offered deleted scenes. Now, as I was saying before, some Blu-rays or DVDs don't include any deleted scenes or just a few, so to get 21 of them is pretty crazy. We have an option to toggle on commentary from Edgar Wright, and the original audio of the scenes gets lowered so that we can hear Edgar over everything, and he essentially discusses why certain scenes were removed and why they weren't included in the final product. He also just walks us through his thought process with directing and just like story beats and whatnot in the deleted scenes.
Now there's a joke here which about Ramona smoking, and we did have originally, which is from the books, the idea of like people smoking and it being deemed evil. And what we were going to do, you can see that the cigarette here is blue. What we were going to do is black out the cigarette. You can see elsewhere on the DVD, you can see the special effects test with Chris Evans as Lucas Lee and his blacked out cigarette. But it all just became a bit too much, and even before we'd finished shooting, I'd already decided to ditch the gag. So we did it with Mary and Chris Evans, and then we didn't bother with anybody else.
Because a lot of these scenes didn't make it to the final cut, some of them are missing special effects or 3D assets that would have been added in post-production, which is normal for scenes that don't go that far into the process or don't make it that far into the process. Because there's so many extras, and like I said, it'd be impossible for me to go through all of it in a reasonable amount of time, I did include some honorable mentions that are completely personal, just ones that I wanted to mention from almost every section. So my honorable mention for the deleted scenes is the Scott and Ramona in the park first and second version, because I just love the overall vibes of that scene, and just Ramona teasing Scott more. We get to see more of her personality that doesn't really make it into the final film, which is fine. I love all iterations of Ramona. I'm never one to complain about her. In general, it's always fun to see deleted scenes. It's like looking at an alternate universe. Certain scenes could change the entire meaning of the film in certain ways, like very pivotal things, like the knives ending that we will talk about a little later when we talk more about storyboards. But all I can say is thank God for the test audience. I'm thankful every day. Scott Pilgrim vs. the Bloopers is our next extras section, and there's no options to watch individual bloopers like we have with the deleted scenes. It just plays straight through. In general, I love a blooper reel because it just shows how much fun actors and crew have on set, which is especially important with this specific crew and the consistent praise that they give about their time on set, even years later. Their enjoyment is very evident in the extras on the Blu-ray, but when you look outside of the film and have them talk so fondly about it over 10 years later, it just puts into perspective when we actually get to see what they're reminiscing about on camera. We'll later see how taxing this film was on all parties physically and mentally in other parts of the extras, but seeing how much fun they're having adds once again to my enjoyment of watching the final product. My honorable mention for this are the toss takes, a mini compilation of the 33 tries it took Michael Cera to land the package that he ordered from Amazon in the trash. Just some general notes about the film's documentaries really quickly. They were recorded during production as the film was actively being made and not created after the fact, which is so important for archival and film history purposes because we are directly watching the creation of the film recorded by people who were there, and that's the best way to know about something, is to hear directly from the people involved. The Blu-ray has several documentaries of the film that are completely missing from the DVD, obviously for space reasons, as we discussed before. I love film documentaries because it takes so many people to create a film, and oftentimes we just know the actors and like the directors, but we don't really get into how many people and the people specifically who are involved within the film's creation. So in these documentaries we get to actually see them at work, even if they're not the main focus of the documentary. We get to see them around, and I think that's incredibly important because a lot of people work on every single film that we see. The first documentary is Making of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is split into two, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. In Chapter 1, we hear from Edgar, Michael Bacall, Brian, Jared LaBeouf, who was the production executive, Bill Pope, mentioned before, Nira Park, who was a director, Laura Jean Shannon, who was the costume designer. She did such an amazing job, several actors and their thoughts about playing their characters, and so many more people. Here we get to hear about how Edgar was first introduced to the graphic novel, Brian's involvement in his creative process at the time, which is important once again because of adaptation studies. I don't know if I mentioned this, but Brian's involvement in the film was way more than what we actually get to see on the Blu-ray footage, just based on his blog post that came out around the same time. We also get a glimpse of the casting tapes, more on that later, and comments on who was cast and why. We also see the storyboards compared to the practice and rehearsal to the final shot of the scene that is shown in the storyboard, which we will see more comparisons of that later. There's also an emphasis on on-location shooting, which is a callback to Edgar's interview that I was reading earlier. In general, once again, my enjoyment is just elevated by these specific extras because everyone talks so highly of the people they worked with in this specific section of the Blu-ray, and the behind-the-scene footage of them all getting along, laughing, and playing with one another is just great to see. The second half of this documentary, titled Chapter 2, is all about fights, training, and stunts. And on Radio Maru, on August 29, 2008, Brian wrote, "The site Movie Hole has an excerpt from an interview with Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's set to play Ramona in the Scott Pilgrim movie. The full interview will be up next week, but they already posted some stuff about Pilgrim. I'm going to put up the screenshot on the screen. I'm not going to read everything, but just the highlighted bits. The interviewer asks Mary, "What are you working on next?" She responds, "I have a film I'm going to start with Michael Cera and directed by Edgar Wright called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I'm extremely excited about it. I actually just started kung fu training for it today." After posting that part, Brian wrote, "As far as I know, she, Michael Cera, and this name intentionally left blank, are going to start fight training now-ish and is going on for something like 6 or 2 weeks. So the reason it's intentionally left blank is because a lot of the actors were not announced publicly yet." In the documentary itself, we get to hear a lot from training coordinators and stunt coordinators, as well as stunt doubles. The main stunt coordinator was Bradley James Allen, who unfortunately passed away not too long ago. He was a part of Jackie Chan's stunt team, and he was also the supervising stunt coordinator for Shang-Chi. I bring up the Shang-Chi thing because there is a connection to somebody else who worked on this film and Shang-Chi. We'll talk about that later on in the video. Besides hearing from various fight coordinators and trainers, we also hear from actors on their training, doing their own stunts and wanting to do them as well. Some of the training included skateboard training for Chris Evans, who played Lucas Lee, rollerblading training for Mary, stamina training for everybody, including Edgar and other actors who didn't have any action scenes in the film, which I thought was a really cool team building exercise just to join in the training. Training also included non-fighting things, such as training with instruments for all the members of Sex Bob-omb, Crash and the Boys, and The Clash at Demon Head. The next 2 documentaries are all about music. The first one is called The Music Featurette. I found an article from the LA Times written by Todd Martins in 2008 titled "Ready to Rock, Scott Pilgrim has Michael Cera. Music." I highlighted some parts, but I'm just going to read the whole thing. O'Malley has had conversations with Wright concerning the film's music and is getting comfortable with the fact that the decisions ultimately won't be his. "I think that element is going to be really interesting," O'Malley said. "I guess they'll probably be doing a lot of music in advance because I'm already hearing rumblings of who's doing what, and it's pretty exciting. You know, I'm drawing a black and white comic book," O'Malley continued. "It's dead silent. I honestly don't hear music in my head that much for the individual bands, and in terms of mood music, I've been trading mixed CDs with Edgar Wright ever since we were first introduced, and I know we're pretty much on the same page. Plumtree's Scott Pilgrim certainly seems to be a safe bet to be heard at some point in the film. We do hear it briefly. I've been pushing it," O'Malley said, "and as far as I know, it's in the cards. So what music might people expect in the film?" O'Malley clams up when it comes to the topic of who he wants to hear in the film, even if being asked to name hypothetical dream bands. "It's already a little late in the process for me to speculate about this." There are so many cool musicians and audio engineers who worked on this film, and I brought up that article because a lot of the bands that were featured in Brian's mixtapes that he was making for the Scott Pilgrim volumes as they were coming out and posting them on places like Radio Maru were included in the creation of the film. When he's quoted saying things like, "It's too late to speculate and I'm hearing rumblings of who's doing what," just looking back on that and being like, oh, Metric's literally in this, Sloan is in this, that is actually crazy. The music featurette, like I said, is all about the music in the film, both the diegetic and non-diegetic sound. So sound that is coming from objects or the people in the film, like their mouths, their singing, or their instruments, or non-diegetic sound, which is sound the audience only hears. It's usually referred to as like the original soundtrack, like the background music, if you will. There's more about the training the actors who play the instruments had to do, and there's, like I said, so many different groups who were tasked to write for different bands. There's not one person writing for every band. You have somebody who was assigned to write Sex Bob-omb songs, and you have somebody who was assigned to write the Crash songs, things like that. As I mentioned before, we have Metric, obviously their black sheep is famously featured here. We have Sloan, Broken Social Scene, Nigel, who's the composer of the original soundtrack. His work is all over the Blu-ray features in different segments of the extras and in the background and whatnot. There's also Beck Hansen, aka Beck, like the Beck. He was writing the Sex Bob-omb songs. There's also rehearsal footage and instrument-related injuries, and there were a lot. The last music-related documentary is called You Too Can Be Sex Bob-omb, and it's hosted by Chris Murphy of Sloan and Mark Webber. It's filmed like those documentaries that you used to see on music channels like MTV. Basically, Chris is teaching, and I put teaching in quotation marks, Mark to play garbage truck, because the way that this is shot and the way that they are acting, it appears that Mark already knows how to play garbage truck on the guitar. Mark is like a surrogate audience member, if that makes sense. There's an alt-rock TV watermark in the top left, which is why it reminds me of things like MTV. There's also inserts on the screen of the music notes for how to play garbage truck, as well as the numbers of fingers you need to do each chord. It's very much like a follow along type of thing. In the alternative edits part of the extras, certain scenes and shots were edited differently than they were in the final film, and my educated guess is probably because of pacing issues that were fixed in the final cut. For example, the scene that shows what's Wallace's and what's Scott's with those visuals that attribute each item to each person, it's actually faster in the alternative edit as opposed to the final edit, which gives us time to actually read what we're seeing. I'm assuming these changes were made during editing as opposed to being something that became a deleted scene, because a lot of the alternative edits that include CGI and visuals have that, as opposed to the deleted scenes we saw earlier that don't include that because they didn't get that far into production. Other scenes were cut shorter instead of making them longer or more drawn out, and that's probably pacing as well. The bits and pieces section of the Blu-ray has a lot of different versions of small background conversations that happen in the film. For example, what Cuomo is saying to Michael Bacall on the stairs at Julie's party, or when Scott is entering the Chaos Theater and he says something like, "Oh yeah, the comics are better than the movie." It also includes different line readings and slightly different versions of final lines from other characters as well. We get to see some behind the scenes moments too, which makes it feel a bit like a blooper reel. We get to see people fixing each other's hair and outfits. We also get a slate montage, which is that thing that the actors and the directors slam down and say, "Shot blank, take blank, action." My honorable mention for this section is Jason Schwartzman's ad-libs. Jason does a lot of ad-libs when he's getting into the limo, and his line readings are absolutely hilarious. We already know he's such a funny person because of his performance as the Spot in Across the Spider-Verse. It all comes back to Spider-Verse, but he's just hilarious, and we see him making people laugh throughout the Blu-ray and other features as well. The next section that branches off into several other videos, there's a lot of unfolding and unraveling going on in this video, are the pre-production. Now, pre-production includes every material that was created before the film was actually shot, and that includes reference videos, storyboarding, animatics, all of that. In the pre-production footage section, there are 10 videos listed, and they range from animatics, videos taken of stunts, rigs, and fights to reference during production, behind the scenes for Ninja Revolution, including the motion capture that was used to create it, rehearsal videos with Ellen and Michael practicing the dance, pre-VFX, and more. We also get the footage of Jason Faulkner and Justin Meldal Johnson that I mentioned earlier, recording the bass battle that we see with Scott and Todd Ingram. My honorable mention is the Patel rig test. So here we have Brad Allen and Garrett Warren who are practicing on the rig, essentially showing how Sacha and Michael would move and fight on it. This is kind of them mapping out how the fight would actually work. It's like you can see the cogs turning in their brain as they map out, okay, this is where this punch would have to land in order to spin Sacha this way so that he's positioned, and Michael would have to be here and do this. It's just really cool seeing people in their element, experts who know how fight choreographing works and how these rigs work, and putting it all together. And then you can obviously compare it to the final product and see how they implemented what they learned in this video to the final product. The next section in the pre-production part is animatics. We have 17 of them. They borrow a lot from the storyboards done by 3 people, technically 4, but we'll talk about that a little later. Some of the animatics are storyboards mixed with the footage of stuntmen doing the choreographed fights, as well as the actors playing instruments, performing in practice spaces, and some animation done by Oscar Wright, brother of Edgar Wright, and also one of our storyboard artists on the film. My honorable mention are the first and second Gideon fight videos. They show where the VFX coins will come in through inserts, as well as showing when it'll be the actors themselves doing the stunts or the stunt people or a mix of both. It's actually really cool editing, and they use text, like color text, to be like, this is going to be Michael here in this shot, and then it's going to be a stunt double next. It's a lot of planning and a lot of editing, and doing it this way makes the editing in the end and even the choreographing of the actual fights easier, because they can just pull up this video. I mean, I don't know how they did it because I obviously wasn't on set, but they could theoretically pull up this video and be like, okay, here's how we mapped it out, this is how it's going to be shot, and then this is how it's going to be edited. So they're not figuring it out as they go. My general note is that these animatics are not silent. They often include the original soundtrack by Nigel that I mentioned before that match the specific scenes. For instance, the animatic for the Roxy fight, we hear the original song Roxy that we hear in the background of the actual fight, which once again shows the effort put into this video, because they easily could have just had the footage or the animatics in complete silence silence, and that would have been fine, but adding the music really elevates it. And not only original soundtracks, we get sound effects too, like punching sounds edited to match the animatics and things like that. And that might have been done to help during the creation of the film and not after the fact, because that could have also helped with editing as well. But either way, I think it's a cool thing to include regardless. Next, we have the rehearsal videos, and there are 8 of them. They include test shoots where actors are on set in location, running their lines or playing their instruments. Now, these rehearsal videos weren't shot on an official film camera or with professional audio equipment. From what I can tell, both the visual and the audio is coming from a handheld video camera, and it's mainly just to test the camera shots and angles that would be used in the final film and that would be done on the professional film cameras. This isn't my honorable mention for this section, but I just wanted to bring up that the Sex Bob-omb Summertime video is edited to match the beat and the lyrics with the rehearsal footage, and that once again is something that they didn't really have to do. It's just a nice treat for the fans. My real honorable mention is the Scott and Gideon sword fight video, where they edited the sound effects from the actual Scott and Gideon fight that we see at the end of the movie over the rehearsal video. For example, the impact sounds when their swords hit each other and that type of thing, which they did not have to do. They could have easily just put an original soundtrack under the video and just let it go, but they purposefully edited these impact sounds just to add to the enjoyment of everything, or maybe even to test how it would work in the final product. Either way, I enjoyed it, so that's one of the end goals, I suppose. The props, rigs, and montage video isn't super long like some of the documentaries are, but it's still a lot of fun to watch. We get to see objects and sets being destroyed by the elements and other objects in the film. For example, Ramona's hammer gets tested out in the Roxy fight scene. We also get to see Edgar testing a lot of the low-risk human stunts, like falling in the snow for the deleted Scott and Ramona Park scene that Michael Cera actually ended up filming in the deleted scene, and also the Is Scott Here scene being done with boxes, like a stack of boxes for the stunt person to jump through to simulate the window. In general, we just get to see how the physics work on these objects getting smashed and like the wind blowing and whatnot, just to see what materials they might use to create the real set or object for the final product. I was very tempted to go through every single casting tape in this section, but I will not. I have to show some self-restraint here. The casting tapes are split into actors, so in order from what we see Ellen, Mark's, Bree's, Aubrey's, Brandon's, Satcha's, May's, Allison's, Johnny's, Kieran's, and then Abigail, who was the 8-year-old drummer for Crash and the Boys. All of these casting tapes were filmed in different places or locations, which we get to see on text in the videos themselves, different production companies that the actors were signed with and that type of thing. I don't necessarily have an honorable mention here because I enjoyed all of these, but I just want to give a huge shout out to Satcha's casting tape because the way he does physical comedy in this and the way he does the impact of getting hit by Scott in this video is so hilarious. I enjoyed every second of it. The hair and makeup footage is my absolute favorite extra on the Blu-ray, and it has been for years. I adore it. Basically, it's done to maintain consistency throughout shooting and to test how different outfits, makeups, and wigs look on camera and in certain lighting. This specific hair and makeup footage also includes facial expression tests too. We're going back to our friends at Studio Binder for their What is a Screen Test in Acting? Testing wardrobe and makeup. What is a screen test in acting used for when the talent is already casted? Typically, it's used to see how things like wardrobe, makeup, colors, and accessories look on an actor. Screen tests also help the cinematographer and director see how an actor looks on different types of cameras with specific lenses or with various lighting techniques. In this specific hair and makeup footage, we get to see Michael, Mary, Ellen, Kieran, Johnny, Allison, Mark, May, and Bree walk into frame in outfits from different points in the film and pose according to Edgar's direction. We don't hear that in this specific video, but we hear it in other portions of the extras, and it's the exact same footage.
In the camera test, it was like getting all the different looks.
Look at the camera. And the camera said something kind of cute. We filled the ice. But now it's pissed you off. That's offended you. And you open the camera already. And you give it one last look. And then me.
That was a full relationship.
One of the reasons this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, extra is because of the music we hear in the background from the original soundtrack. Love Me Some Walking is my absolute favorite song from the original soundtrack, and it's such a dreamy song. I love hearing it. We also hear Hillcrest Park and Black Sheep, if I'm not mistaken, Bree's version, when we get to see Brie Larson doing her test. Under music promos, we have music videos, and there are 4 of them here. We have Garbage Truck, Black Sheep, Threshold, and Summertime, my personal favorite Sex Bob-omb song. They're all uninterrupted. They're longer versions of each song than what we see in the film. There's no inserted dialogue or disruptions. For example, when Sex Bob-omb are performing before we meet Matthew Patel, we get to hear the entire song. They're not interrupted by him. My honorable mention, of course, is Black Sheep. We get scenes from the film edited to perfection over the music, fight scenes, and the hit impact matching up with the beat and whatnot. It truly is a music video of the 2010s. Now, y'all don't fight me. I'm not entirely sure if this guy's name, his DJ name, is pronounced as like a full word or if it's pronounced by each individual letter, but I will be doing it by letter because I don't want to mispronounce it if that's the case. But the next section are the OSYMYSO remixes. They're the audio-visual remixes done by him. He is a UK DJ who is known for remixes using pop culture. So for Scott Pilgrim specifically, there are 7 remixes, one called Prepare, another called Hey, one called Love, we have one called Ramona, Fight, Yeah, and What? Each of these are themed. They take voice lines from the film that feature the specific phrase or word that it's titled after, and they were edited by this DJ to instrumentals from the original soundtrack to create a specific rhythm. It uses a lot of repetition to get that rhythm across. Each remix has an end screen graphic with the film title and a release date. I'm assuming it's some type of TV promotional commercial. There's a level to storytelling with these remixes, and it provides a level of mystery too. That's another reason why I think it might have been used as a promotional commercial on TV, but not only TV, but YouTube as well. While doing my research, I found that these remixes had their own special YouTube channel called Scott Pilgrim Remixes. This is different from the official Scott Pilgrim YouTube page. This DJ is credited for doing the audio on YouTube, but there's no editor credit, and because the Blu-ray titles it as audio-visual mixes, I can only assume that he did both. Here's some screenshots I took from the YouTube. Now, if you're getting whiplash from this old YouTube layout, girl, me too. So here we have the Scott Pilgrim Remixes on YouTube banner. This is the description for the Prepare one. This one was posted on July 16, 2010. And then we also get a snippet of the other videos when they were posted and how many views they were getting around the same time as well. Next up, we get to talk about the visual effects. So here we have 3 options. VFX before and after, which is narrated by the visual effects supervisor of the film, Fraser Churchill. We have Roxy Fight / Ribbon version, and Phantom Montage high-speed footage. Churchill breaks down the VFX for several scenes, including Ramona skating away in the snow after that night that she and Scott spent together. In this segment, Churchill seems to be directly controlling the video footage, so it shows the before, the VFX, and the practical effects, and after through a crossfade. In general, we get to see more of the non-VFX footage of many of the scenes in the segments, and it's always kind of weird to see how it looked before that stuff was added on top of it, but it's always great to hear, like I've been stressing throughout this entire thing, it's always great to hear directly from the minds of the people who thought all this stuff up and executed what we get to see in the final product. Everyone has such a different creative process, so it's so interesting to hear how they all go about it, and in my opinion, like 16 years later, I think the VFX still holds up for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. In the Soundworks collection, Sound for Film Profile, we get a documentary with talking heads and confessional inserts of the key players who created the sound effects for the film. For example, we hear from people like Julian Slater, who was the supervising sound editor, Chris Burdon, who was the sound re-recording mixer, and Doug Cooper, who was another re-recording mixer. We also get to hear about the dialogue that was going on between Nigel, the musicians, and some of the people I just listed to make sure that the individual sounds and the original soundtrack all work together and sound like they belong in a shared universe. I have several honorable mentions here, just mini honorable mentions. Some of them break down the little sounds that are important to the pacing and the humor of the film, especially the humor. The whip pans with the whooshing, for example, and the diegetic sound being used for transitions or just humor beats, like we get some of that feedback kind of adding to the humor as well. It was also explained that the punches sound different in the different fights and they're all personalized to a degree. So next next time you watch the film, I really want to challenge you to pay really close attention to those sounds, just sound in general in the film, but also especially the punching, and hear the differences between the punches and how that affects the scene. Like, how is this punch different from that punch that this character does, and what does it add to the scene? I think that would be a really fun exercise to do. I could go on and on and on about the importance of sound and music in film, and how a lot of it goes under the radar when we're watching the film because it's done so seamlessly that it's just something that we experience, and it's like, oh, okay. But when you really go back and then you're like, okay, what exactly was used in this specific scene to create this type of emotion with a less focus on visual and more on sound, I think that's where it really gets interesting. Like, what type of instruments do you use to create anger or fear in an audience member? That's the type of stuff that really interests me, especially when it comes to films like Scott Pilgrim that have such a music focus. If you're encountering Scott Pilgrim after the fact, like a lot of us did, we missed out on the trailers that were being shown on television, and the Blu-ray solves that for us. We get to see it all. For theatrical trailers, we have 3 of them. There's the teaser trailer, the main trailer, and the international trailer. At the end of the main trailer, it has an end graphic with the www.scottpilgrimthemovie.com, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. In general, I love how unassuming the trailers start. It's similar to the books, but the intensity of the fights really brings the nonsense in because it appears like a normal, like, rom-com, and then it just goes off the rails where it's like, oh, we're just fighting. We just have inhuman powers. Sure, why not? The TV spots are so fun. I miss TV spots. We've fallen as a society without our TV spots. TV spots are basically a short trailer or teaser that are featured between commercials and TV shows to get people interested or curious about the film. We get 18 TV spots in this Blu-ray. Now, I kind of split them up into themes because we won't be talking about all 18 of them. But what I've noticed is that we get character-based spots, which introduce the individuals with log lines. I think one of the funniest things about this is that for Wallace's, it says like, oh, he's Scott's #1 fan, and you know Wallace could not give a about Scott in many aspects of his life. We also get reviews, which are quotes from film critics and magazines like the Rolling Stone and what they thought about the film. We also get nouns like break, for example. You'll have to look that one up. There's a lot going on with the nouns spots. Also, they're so funny. I love a log line. I love just like a silly thing. So some of my honorable mentions are the future TV spot. They don't have a future until they deal with her past. And then there's romance. A story about a boy, a girl, and her 7 evil exes, and her past. He can't get past her past. Like, they're so dramatic. I love it. This is similar to the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World DVD because we did get a trailer for the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game before the beginning of the movie, like before it started. But that trailer is actually different from these trailers. We get 4 video game trailers in the Blu-ray, which is the PlayStation Network launch, E3 2010 extended debut, San Diego Comic-Con 10, PlayStation Network, and Zombies. For the PlayStation Network launch, essentially it says that the game would be available on the network, and PlayStation Network, or PSN, is Sony's online platform that allows gamers to enjoy a variety of gaming-related services such as purchasing games, downloading content, connecting with other players, managing accounts, redeeming rewards, and using multimedia applications such as Netflix, Spotify, and others. Here's a post from Brian via his Radio Maru blog, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game on PSN. The video game is available now on PSN. Check out this 5 out of 5 review on Joystick. Pre-order the game via Ubisoft, and note, this game will be released on Xbox Live Arcade in 2 weeks' time. As of this writing, there are no other releases planned for Wii, PSP, or other system. E3, now if you're a youngin', you guys didn't grow up with E3. E3, also known as the Electronics Entertainment Expo, was the video game industry's largest annual business event. E3 typically took place in the early summer in the Los Angeles Convention Center. The show was first held in 1995, and E3 2014 marked the expo's 20th anniversary. It unfortunately was killed off due to the COVID-19 pandemic, like a lot of things were. Essentially, think of it as Comic-Con, but for game announcements. And when I think of E3 personally, I think of game and console announcements like the 3DS and Nintendo specifically. For the San Diego Comic-Con 2010 PlayStation Network trailer, it's essentially just E3 review quotes, but I wanted to take a moment to talk about how Scott Pilgrim has a very long history at San Diego Comic-Con specifically, which could really really be discussed in its own separate video. I also wanted to mention that for San Diego Comic-Con 2025, which was last year, I was there for the Scott Pilgrim EX panel, which was really cool while working on this video to do that kind of full circle moment there. And just on the history of Scott Pilgrim San Diego Comic-Con in general, when I was doing research for this, I found so many posts and stories about Brian's presence there. And just to think how he was just, you know, at the Oni Press booth, like, hey, come say hi to me, come meet me after the panel, blah, blah, blah. And then to be in the room, and story time later, but to be in the room and then the panel's ending and I'm about to leave and I just hear the announcer going, you need to leave the room, because everybody started bum rushing the stage. I said, oh, because they wanted to talk to Brian. And I was like, oh, y'all better relax. But anyway, like I said, it was just really cool, that kind of full circle moment of the original game being discussed and shown at Comic-Con, and then having not like a sequel, but you know, like another game in the Scott Pilgrim universe also being shown and discussed at Comic-Con almost 15 years later was really cool. I'm sure many of you have already seen the Adult Swim's Scott Pilgrim versus the animation. So this is a semi-animated short of the flashback where Scott meets Lisa and when he moves away. And this is directly taken from Brian's art from Volume 2. It's fully voice acted by the live action cast and it's colored as well. We have Michael as Scott, Mae Whitman as Lisa, who is my voice acting goat. I love Mae Whitman. She does such a phenomenal job every time she voice acts. She's the coolest. We have Allison as Kim, and then we also have Jason as Simon, which has narrative significance if you read the comics. You know, Scott's whole thing of mistaking people for Gideon and whatnot. When the Scott Pilgrim anime was first announced and we got the cast list in that first announcement, I remember seeing a lot of people being like, oh, you know, I don't think Michael Cera is going to do a good job voice acting and whatnot. And I had no doubts because of the Scott Pilgrim versus the animation, because I heard Michael Cera as Scott in an animation before. I was like, oh, he's going to be fine. Y'all are overthinking it. And lo and behold, there he was. This is related to the film, but unrelated to the Blu-ray, but I have to bring this up. Scott Pilgrim had a mad spoof called Scott Pilgrim versus the Magical World of Disney, and I wanted to bring it up because obviously it's related to the film, but it was just in the back of my subconscious for like a decade, since 2010. And then one moment it clicked for me. I'm like, oh my god, that's actually literally Scott Pilgrim. You might play Destiny. You're the intellectual of the millennia. I put two and two together and there it was. And this just reminds me of it. If you haven't seen it, you have to go watch it. You have to. I've been harassing and like haunting my Instagram followers with this image of Kim for years, so you have to see it. Does anybody remember that old Orbit gum commercial where that lady is confronting her significant other for assumably cheating on her with the woman in the scene, and they all cuss each other out and use nonsense words and phrases to do so?
You son of a biscuit-eating bulldog.
What the French, Toast?
Did you think I wouldn't find out about your little doo-doo head cootie queen?
Who are you calling a cootie queen, you lint liquor?
Pickle you, kumquat!
You're overreacting.
No, Bill, overreacting was when I put your convertible into a wood chipper. Stinky McStink face!
You Hoboken.
Fabulous. New Orbit Raspberry Mint cleans another dirty mouth. For a good clean feeling, no matter what.
That's essentially what the Scott Pilgrim versus the Censors TV safe version was. In voiceover, the actors dubbed over some of the cursing and non-safe for work phrases within the film with nonsense words and phrases. For example, owl was used a lot to replace the word a. My honorable mention, and there were so many to choose from, but my absolute favorite one of these censors is, instead of saying you cocky when Scott is confronting Todd for punching the highlights out of Knives' hair, he yells instead, you Oscar Grouch. And it's just so funny, Michael's delivery with that one. Although the hair and makeup test is still my absolute favorite extra in the Blu-ray, the blogs were by far my favorite thing to research and to learn about. We get 15 of these blogs, and they're referred to as blogs and not vlogs because I'm assuming that the term vlog either didn't exist then or it wasn't as popularized. They were first posted in April of 2010, which I found out through a blog called Blogorama, which was one created by Marty Day, who has an archive section on his website, and he is still posting to this day. I am very thankful to people like Marty Day who were posting in real time at the time that Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was being developed and spoken about, because it really does help me understand the film and the production of the film, looking at it from the future. With the creation and the sharing of these blogs, it is important to note the importance of creators being able to directly reach their imagined audiences and vice versa as something is being created. We will be talking about that more in the Snot Girl video, but it's important here because in some of the screenshots of these vlogs and where they were posted, you'll see some people and fans commenting on the vlogs or the blogs and what they're seeing and their excitement about the upcoming movie. The blogs themselves, during filming, we had an unnamed cameraman. I couldn't find who the cameraman was, so if anybody knows, please let me know. We have an unnamed cameraman who was recording on a video camera with Edgar explaining to the camera what is going on and what will happen on set during that day. They were uploaded in real time, for what I could tell, once a week. The blogs weren't super long, they're like the documentaries were. They were like a few minutes at most. The cameraman also occasionally asks Edgar questions, and the actors as well, from behind the camera. Each blog has a theme and it covers the behind the scenes of filming for that day or for that series of scenes. The blogs are also edited, including inserts to aid what a person is saying to the camera, including voiceovers in some parts. For example, Edgar explains why he doesn't say action and he says go, so then we get a montage of Edgar saying go during different parts of shooting. Once again, it is so important to hear from the people who created the things that we enjoyed for educational or for even entertainment purposes. So to have these vlogs and to see what was going on as the film was being shot is also incredibly important for film history as well. Like I mentioned with Michel's work, a lot of that stuff is gone and it's missing. So to archive as much information as possible, to have these videos really helps with the purpose of archiving and just film knowledge and creation in general. This, I think, is one of the most interesting things about the blogs, is where they were posted. Once again, the importance of archiving. A lot of these website URLs are no longer accessible. From what I could find, there are 3 confirmed places and possibly more for where the blogs were posted. The first one is Edgar's website/blog called Edgar Right Here, and his MySpace. This wasn't featured in the blog section of the Blu-ray, but I did find this on, I believe it's Edgar's blog, Edgar Right Here. He posted in January 9th, 2009. The double post on Friday is not something that will happen regularly, but I would like to bring you this curious picture. I shall be impressed if anybody can tell me what it is. And then he goes on to talk about some things with Adult Swim. But obviously, this is Scott and Wallace's apartment. He posted this while they were either constructing the apartment, the outside of it at least, and none of us really knew because how would we know? But looking back on it, we're like, yeah, that's very obviously the outside of Scott and Wallace's apartment. So Edgar was just giving these special hints to fans who were following along in real time. The blogs were also posted on the official Scott Pilgrim website, scottpilgrimthemovie.com, which was launched in February 2009. So when I was doing research for this video, this is all I could see from the page. But thankfully, and this is another archiving thing, Edgar took a picture of himself to promote this website. And if you look very closely, you can see that he posted the first blog, which was called Introduction to Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and we can see how it looked at the time that the website was still functioning. On the side, we can see recent posts, which is the blog one, and then we can also see recent comments. So if you click on these comments, we would be able to see what these usernames were saying about the blogs and the film and Scott Pilgrim in general. This is a little bit of a tangent on the scottpilgrimthemovie.com's website. The layout of the website updated as time went on, and it included the same animated graphic I showed from the DVD. You can kind of see that on the left in this screenshot. And here we have watch video options, remixes on YouTube. I believe that is the remixes I was speaking about before. There's Social-Rama, free ringtones. You can create your own Scott Pilgrim avatar. You can watch the trailer. They had this like mobile game called Pilgrim's Punch Out. And then it also has advertisements for all of the volumes. This screenshot was obviously from the website after the DVD and Blu-ray packs were released, which is a callback to Brian's post. So yeah, it was just changing actively. Now it's promoting taking the film home and being able to own it yourself. And then at the very bottom of this screenshot, we can see some of the Blu-ray features were available to watch for free online. We can see the learning to play instruments section, which I believe is part of the documentaries, if I'm not mistaken, and also the actors talking about the stunts that they did on their own and stuff like that. Because they were 15 blogs. It was very hard for me to pick an honorable mention, but I decided to talk about blog 5, which is From Comic Book Panel to Screen. It is a connection to adaptation studies, which I mentioned before. The cameraman also asks Edgar how faithful to the books they're being, and Edgar explains that some are in spirit of the books and others are one-to-one, the changes and the similarities. He also explains some of the comic book pages look better in art versus live action, which obviously they're two different mediums. It'll be hard to exactly replicate it, but I think they did a really good job with some of those one-to-one, and we do see that side-by-side comparison in some of the gallery images that we'll talk about very soon. We see the comic books constantly being included in the blogs, which also ties in Edgar's point of fidelity, the importance of keeping some things the same, and to Brian's vision of Scott Pilgrim as a whole, to a certain extent, of course. But with the comic book parts, sometimes in the blog we'll just have the book be slid into frame, and then we get to see, okay, this is what they're filming right now, this is the inspiration, especially in the Goodwill scene. Just some general thoughts, just to call back to what I was saying about the importance of these blogs existing in the first place and us still having access to them. Part of the importance to me is that it was filmed in real time versus them reflecting on the shoot after the fact, so we get everybody's fresh thoughts and feelings about what is actually happening in that moment. They also talk about the challenges of that day. Obviously, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. They are doing work, especially when it comes to the stunts and things like that, so we get to hear more of what everybody says about that. We also have some of the actors showing off the sets and the props, what they think about doing certain scenes and why certain decisions were made. Edgar really shines in these blogs. His hard work and passion and dedication really comes off when he's talking to the camera, and parts of the blogs were included in other parts of the extras as well. We just get to see them completely uninterrupted here. The galleries are featured on the DVD, so if you don't have the Blu-ray and you just have the DVD, you can still see them there. For these, unfortunately, we don't have any cool button sounds or an original soundtrack playing in the background, but it is what it is. We have the option of clicking through these images on a remote or with a controller, whatever you're accessing these discs through, or they'll change by themselves through a timed cycle. The context for the photos that were taken by people, there's some other things in the galleries that are not photos taken by people. At a certain point during pre-production and production, Edgar and others started taking pictures, and I know in Edgar's case, he was posting them to his website and other social medias. According to Blogorama, Edgar would post images revealing actors who hadn't been publicly announced yet, and the way these reveals were done is that, as you can see here, the actors would hold up a panel or a picture from the comics covering their face as a teaser, and people in the comments for the social media posts and in other places would speculate on who the actors would be. These gallery images are split into a few different categories. Photos taken by specific people. As I mentioned, Edgar had a blog, and not all of them that were on the blog are featured on the Blu-ray, like the cast reveal pictures.
I've been doing this photo blog throughout the whole production, and this morning I decided to take a picture at 8 o'clock in the morning of the crew, so then we can contrast it, see their happy smiling faces at 8 o'clock in the morning on the first day of the shoot, compared to whatever time we wrap on the last day of the shoot. So here's the first one. So we shall see who's left.
Johnny Simmons also had photos featured, as well as Ellen Wong and Mark Webber. Brian also took pictures that were posted on radiomaru.com and other social media sites that were not featured on the Blu-ray. He posted on August 5th, 2010, my behind-the-scenes photos from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I'll be uploading a handful of photos every day between now and the movie. See them all at my Flickr page, which is another social media site, while I post arbitrary highlights here. So this is a picture of the members of Sex Bob-omb practicing. We have one of Allison, Mark Webber, Aubrey, and more. Next, we have posters, which are split into two. We have theatrical posters, which are posters used to promote the film. Some feature release dates and others don't. We also have fictional posters, which are posters that were featured in the film's diegesis. They're posters specifically for the film's world. For example, the Lucas Lee magazines and film posters for Let's Hope There's a Heaven, etc. We also get the Now magazine with Clash of Demon Head. There's an other section that just has Brian's flip charts, which are the drawings of the Crash and the Boys and the twins flip charts that Steven is flipping through, and they were drawn by Brian, I believe, with like a really big Sharpie marker or something like that. The other part that is in this other subsection are the storyboards. I'm always fascinated about how people choose to visualize certain scenes based on the words that they're given with the screenplay or whatever they're using, and it's obviously going to be different for everybody. We do see that here in the storyboards. I think I alluded to this before, but there are 3 styles, which I discovered were done by 3 different people, and 4 if you include the work from Brian's volumes. The 3 storyboard artists were Oscar Wright, who was the head storyboard artist and conceptual designer. I couldn't find a social media page for him, but if he has one, I'm sorry. There's Rob McCallum, which his social media page here, and Danelle Davenport, and hers here as well. They all collectively have crazy resumes. Like I said, you could pick anybody from this movie and then go down a rabbit hole of what they were doing and have been doing, and it's like, wow, you guys are all like in a completely different league. To understand more about the storyboarding on this specific film, I actually found a podcast run by Craft Service, whose hosts are Parth and Trent. They spoke to all 3 of the storyboard artists in February of 2022, and their description for their podcast is that they talk with award-winning industry professionals about their work. The podcast was split into 3 parts on their website and other places you can listen to podcasts on. In general, they spoke about how they got into the industry, all 3 of them did, how they were introduced to Scott Pilgrim the comic, and how they got involved with the film, including their memories of working on the film and the specific boards that they did. So before I even found this podcast, I went through all of the storyboards and I was able to pick out 3 distinct styles, and so when I found out 3 people did it, I was like, okay, right on the money. So Oscar spoke about how he worked on a lot of different films, but one of my favorite ones that he worked on is from the deleted scene that I talked about, the Scott and Ramona in the park deleted scene, where we see the censored cigarette gag that was not included. Part of it is Brian's work from the comic, and then the bottom 2 panels are Oscar's, and he was mimicking Brian's style here. And in the podcast, he actually spoke about the importance of maintaining the cartoonist style across the 3 storyboard artists' styles, and just in general to production. So he didn't want these storyboards to look like real people or to look like they're actors. She spoke about how she worked on the storyboards for the intro scene before we get the credits, and we can see some of her work here for that section. She also described how she did the "Is Scott here?" scene, which we can see here, and that scene is always one of my favorites. It gets a laugh out of me every single time. She also mentioned that she did the love scene as well, and like with the other parts of this storyboard, some of it is Brian's art directly from the volume, but then there's some additional drawings done by the storyboard artists. Now Rob is a goat to me. I mean, they're all goats, but Rob specifically, because of his work on some of these action scenes, it's so dynamic, and that's another reason why I like the storyboards, because reading the screenplay, and I talked about this in my last video, can be so fun if the person who wrote the screenplay knows how to write. It can be so entertaining even without the visuals, and it's the same thing here with the storyboards. These can be so entertaining even without the audio and the motion. In the podcast, Rob spoke about how he did the blam scene with Kim that we see here. He also spoke about a lot of the action scenes that he did, the Lucas Lee fight as well as the Roxy one, and I absolutely go crazy every time I see that disco ball shattering and I get to see the shards and everything with the actor's face in them. I stand up and clap every time. I love it. One thing I didn't mention before talking about the storyboards, and this is one of the reasons why this Blu-ray just makes my jaw drop to the floor every time, is because they included every single storyboard, including the scenes and lines that were scrapped in final production. That also includes storyboards that were never turned into scenes that were shot, so scenes that were never turned into the deleted scenes that we see on the Blu-ray. And that includes a lot of the knives ending and the Gideon mecha fight. And I just think it's so crazy that there's like hundreds of pages of these storyboards that they decided we're gonna put on this Blu-ray. And to this day, I have not seen something like that on any physical media. They put every single, like, you have to understand how long it took me to go through this, and I did it multiple times. Like the first time I got the Blu-ray, and then like obviously when I was working on this video, and I still cannot wrap my head around every single storyboard. Completely like optional. They did not have to do that, but I'm incredibly grateful that somebody was like, yeah, you need to see every single storyboard, and we absolutely did need to see every single storyboard. I did want to mention too that when you're looking at the storyboard, sometimes you'll see dialogue at the bottom, directions for camera shots and movement and editing cues. I wanted to mention this because Danielle speaks specifically about working with Edgar on the transitions that were included in the storyboards. All of the storyboards are so good, but some of my honorable mentions are that Ramona and Scott in the park deleted scene, because we get to see that censored cigarette that we do get to see in the Lucas Lee deleted scene. But I just love in one version Scott's just like, only evil people, like, don't only evil people smoke cigarettes, like the devil and like all these other people. I just love the awkwardness of that scene. Another one that I'm pretty sure Rob is the one who drew, if I'm going off of his art style in this, Wallace Goes, Envy Adams. I hate that so much, I kind of love her. I love that one.
Envy Adams. I hate that bitch so much, I kind of love her.
Rob also has a very distinct way of drawing eyes that I'm connecting to different parts of the storyboards. That's how I'm attributing this specific one to him. I want to say this scene is also Rob, but I don't know if it's just him or somebody else, because I am seeing a bit of an art style change on the second screenshot. I am perfectly fine with being corrected, but I absolutely love the way this part is boarded. This is when Scott is watching the Clash at Demon Head perform. He's kind of having that existential moment of seeing Envy again, and I absolutely love the emotion and like that kind of heartbreak emotion in Scott's face in this specific panel. And it just reminds me, because we don't get to see a lot of it outside of like a picture booth reel and that type of thing, but just the whole tragedy of the Envy and Scott breakup that we don't get to see here, that we see a little bit more in the volume. So I think that this artist here really captured that on Scott's face, and I love seeing Envy, just period. I love seeing her anytime, so it's a treat looking at this specific one. The work in the Conceptual Art Gallery ranges from sets and environments. For example, we get to see Steven's apartment and Lucas's set, and these are done by somebody with a watermark of S. Kong, which actually stands for Sanford Kong, and I'll put up the website and the social media page for that artist. We also get to see characters and outfits. So there's a hyper-realistic drawing of Mary in several of Ramona's outfits from the comics, as well as her different hair colors, and we also get to see some of Envy's outfits and like different color variations as well. Unfortunately, I couldn't see or find a specific artist that these works are tied to, so if anybody knows, please let me know so I can properly credit them. We get logos too, like the Vegan Police logo and the Twin Dragons logo. We get to also see conceptual art for the props and weapons in the film. We get to see Gideon's cane/sword combo. There are more concept designs that were done by other people that are not included on the Blu-ray or the DVD. That includes Brian's concept of Nega Scott from 2008 that I found on his blog Radio Maru. As I mentioned before, the graphic novel comparison gallery is a direct reference to blog number 5, From Comic Book Panel to Screen. It basically does the whole film from start to finish by doing a side-by-side comparison of the film and the comic page. So here's the shot of this specific scene, and here is the comic page that it was inspired by. It includes scenes from the comic that inspired shots in the film, even if they were changed to another context. For example, in Volume 4 of Scott Pilgrim, at the end of the Roxy fight where Scott and Roxy do their standoff and Scott slices Roxy in half, that is credited for when Scott slices Gideon across the face as inspiration during their fight in the film. We also get to see Mecha-Gideon, the original boss battle. It's not unfortunate that we didn't get the knives ending because Lord knows we got saved by that test audience. The sad part about not getting that ending is that we don't get to see that huge Mecha-Gideon fight, and it's isolated from the other storyboard pages in this specific section. It follows the knives ending as I just mentioned, and it just has all of the designs for Mecha-Gideon. Whoever designed him, he did an excellent job because Gideon had that on. The stripes on his suit and the way that his sneakers are incorporated to the robot body is incredibly cool. I just feel a little bad because the concept art is so detailed that kind of just comes with the job, just knowing that it's possible that your work might not be utilized in the final film. And it's not exclusive to Scott Pilgrim. We see that in almost everything. If any of you have seen the Zootopia 1 art book, you can really see how different the concept art is from the final product. It's like a completely different movie. The trivia track is another version of the movie, at least I count it as another version of the movie. It is the film with notes at the bottom of the screen with explanations of Easter eggs and trivia. For example, why Lucas points with 2 fingers is because he's X number 2, and also the 2 X's on his belt, for example. It also includes what songs are playing, who wrote and performed them, and where certain sound effects were from. We also get dialogue, what locations certain scenes were filmed in, what time they were shot, and who performed what stunt. Here's another screenshot from Radio Maru from November 30th, 2011. Brian wrote, "I made up this dumb joke in the background details of the Scott Pilgrim movie. It says, look closely to see that the Clash of Demon Heads album features the singles You Suck and Stop Calling Me." Brian goes on to say, "It's an email from me to the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World staff graphic designer David Best on March 29th, 2009. Brian wrote in that email, assumably a response to something that David had asked him, ooh, maybe a button saying includes the hit singles You Suck and Stop Calling Me." I wish I had the time to just sit and go over every single trivia track thing that was shown in that movie. 10 billion hours is how long that would take. Generally, for the trivia track, I love it so much because it just goes to show how much thought goes into creating a film like this, especially with Scott Pilgrim itself having so many pop culture references in the volumes itself to becoming its own pop culture reference as the comics and then as the movie and then as the anime and as the game and on and on. There's just so much thought that goes into creating these things, and even if it's something that we kind of brush over as we're watching it, that's what makes the rewatchability so effective, because then you can just go back and then be like, hey, I didn't notice that little detail the first time, or I didn't notice Scott was holding a Gideon cat mug in this scene, and I didn't notice Lucas pointed with 2 fingers because he's the second X, and stuff like that. So it just makes it fun if you didn't figure out these things just watching the film by yourself, to sit down and watch a trivia track where it's like explicitly pointed out to you and you can be like, oh, that's what that is, that's where that sound is, oh, that's the sonic sound effect. It's a lot of fun. The credits on the Blu-ray are the exact same as they are on the DVD. It just lists producers, people in production, post-production, and more, and it also has a with thanks section where they thank a handful of people instrumental in the creation of the film. I like to consider the U-Control on this Blu-ray to be the 7th version of the film. It's kind of on a technicality. I will play the video of what U-Control actually is. I found at least 2 explanation videos that plays depending on what type of Blu-ray you have. This one is the exact same one that is on the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Blu Ray.
At the heart of the Universal Blu Ray high-def experience is U-Control, a fully interactive entertainment experience that puts you in control. U-Control helps you delve deeper into your favorite films by bringing you interviews with cast and crew, behind-the-scenes photos, tech specs, and more. Insert a Universal Blu Ray disc into your set-top Blu Ray player or PlayStation 3, then press the red button on your Blu Ray remote to turn on the U-Control feature. Now, when extra content is available, a U-Control icon will appear on screen. Select the icon for the feature you want, and the extra content will appear without interrupting the movie experience. And you can turn U-Control on or off at any time during the movie. You can also access U-Control options from the U-Control menu. Here, you'll see an index which gives you direct access to U-Control content anywhere it's available in your movie. Check out U-Control and bring your Blu-ray viewing enjoyment to a whole new level.
For the Blu-ray, for the Scott Pilgrim Blu-ray, it only offers picture-in-picture as its U-Control option, which just pulls up the storyboard that we talked about earlier in an insert on the screen as the movie plays. So for example, during Matthew Patel's song that goes triple platinum in my house about once a year, the storyboards show up on their own and then they will disappear when the screen is done. Sometimes there's some pauses in the picture-in-picture where we don't see anything, otherwise it will just pop up on the screen. I think it's just another fun way of watching the film and doing a comparison. So instead of doing a comparison to the comic book pages like we see in the blogs, we're just doing a comparison to the storyboards. There's so much I could say in my closing thoughts section, but I will limit it as much as somebody like me can. Watching this film after seeing all of the extras and after doing all this research, just showcasing all of the work that it took to go into the film. You just sit back and you're like, wow. For some, it's just like an hour, 30 something minutes, and then they just go on with their day. But when you know so much about the production and about the work and just the love that goes into a project, and then you consume that project again, it just makes it a more fulfilling watch. And I am incredibly grateful to every single person who worked on this film, because this was so fun to experience on this side of viewership. Because just watching the film is like, okay, this is great, but then all of this other stuff, and then watching the film, I'm like, wow, top 10 experience. So if you would like to know more about what is on this Blu-ray, because like I said, I had to summarize and generalize a lot of things. If you'd like to experience the 17 plus hours of everything that I discussed in this video today, please pick up the Scott Pilgrim Blu-ray. And it's not even just Scott Pilgrim. If you enjoy a specific movie or television show and you can access it through Blu-ray, I highly recommend. It might not have nearly as much content as this, because this is really biblical levels of greed, but you still get a significant amount of content that will add to your enjoyment of the project as a whole. And on the topic of archiving, I have so much to say about archiving, but yes, my call to action for this video, besides you purchasing or borrowing, whatever, the Blu-ray, is to also start personally archiving. You know, photos that you have in your phone that's in the cloud, maybe consider sending them to some place like Walgreens or some place that can print out these images. You can personally archive photos, you can personally archive mementos in like diaries or journals or anything like that, because then you get to look back on it from the future and you're like, wow, I'm really glad I saved this. I'm really glad I can experience this again through archiving. Even recording through, you know, your phone to a certain extent, because there's a whole conversation to be had about enjoying the moment and whatnot. Even recording or taking pictures and everything like that is considered personal archiving. And then outside of the personal, you can also archive your favorite media. If it's having the physical version of a video game instead of a digital, or it's having a physical disc of a movie that you like, or even a CD from an artist that you love, or even a vinyl, because that's made a really big comeback in the past couple years. Whatever it is, my call to action is archive something. You'll be grateful that you have something of the past you can look back fondly on, or even something that makes you think about the time that you were living in. Like I mentioned before, the next video will be talking about Snot Girl. Now, if I seemed relatively calm in this video, and if you know me from Instagram, it's about to get a little unhinged. But for the next video, we're talking about the comic Snot Girl, and it is a wild ride, so get ready for that.